Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Talking Point. My name is Chelsea Seckora. I'm the creative director for the Eau Claire Area Chamber of Commerce, and we are coming to you from the Wind Technology Studio and want to thank our media sponsor, Royal Credit Union. In today's episode, we will be discussing the HSHS Prevea Recovery Task Force and how it has recently concluded operations. So, to get us started in the conversation, we have Eau Claire Chamber President and CEO, Dave Miner.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, and welcome to all our guests here this morning and to all of our listeners tuning in to see what's going on with this edition of Talking Point. My guests this morning are our two co-chairs for the HSHS Prevea Recovery Task Force. We're going to be talking about why we're pausing everything. But good morning, Dr. Bill Rupp and Jerry Jacobson. First and foremost, I want to thank you both for your leadership over the past 4.5 months. And again, want to remind people they accepted that leadership role very quickly, though I'm not quite sure either was really understanding what was going to happen when I asked it, but they stayed with us, so that's good. So good morning to both of you.
Thank you. And we got to say there were a whole lot of volunteers who did a lot
Yes,
of work.
there was.
And
yes.
we really appreciate all the help. Couldn't have done it without them.
Good morning, Dave and Bill. It was, I won't say it was the most funnest thing I've ever done, but at least we got it. We accomplished some great things, I thought.
We did. And why don't we talk a little bit about that? So again, the news came out January 22nd. Within several days, we had this task force up and running. Bill, as you said, by the end of that first week, we had over 150 people offer help in some way across 13 different parallel tracks of committees and everything. So again, we want to thank all them, shout out, because they are the ones who really did all the hard work. And I think probably more than anything gave us information that we needed. But why don't you both talk a little bit about what you saw going through this, maybe some of those successes, and some of the struggles too?
Well, I think really was one of the biggest success is that the ordinary person in the Chippewa Valley realized that somebody was doing something. It wasn't just waiting to see if anything would happen.
Right.
I think a morale booster to me was one of the biggest. That the world was not going to end.
Correct.
We're having some dang problems, and we continue to do that. But the world is not coming to end.
Right.
And I think that was one of my best feelings that came out initially of the task force. Now, we did a lot of other things, but the people I visited with were all very thankful that we were giving them points that things were occurring, things were happening. You were still going to be able to see healthcare flourish in the Chippewa Valley. So for me, that was one of the biggest accomplishments.
Okay. Bill?
Yeah, we can talk about some of the specific successes, but I think one of the important points is our biggest job was to make requests and suggestions to the powers that have the authority to change things. And we've done that, and there's still a number of requests and suggestions out there that hopefully will come to fruition over the coming months.
Yeah.
We're not in a position to talk about them because we don't get to make those decisions.
Right.
But hopefully a number of things can still happen as the months go by.
You made a comment to me last week that I thought that I wrote down and will keep for future reference as well. But we were a group of volunteers, and all we can do is make recommendations.
Right.
And to your point, we had no authority to do anything with all of that, but just to share what we learned.
Right. And to make requests. But again, we had no authority. Yeah.
Because again, as I would constantly remind people, the entities left, Mayo, Marshfield, Oakley, for all doing good things, but they're private companies, and they still have to, what we said from day one is any decision they make has to be financial sustainability in the long run, or else we're going to line ourselves up for another problem.
I think one of the things, though, that we really did was, especially some of these outside firms, realize that the Chippewa Valley is still robust, and that's a good place to come into. And we've seen that.
Yes.
Both new companies coming in and existing ones expanding. That I think the task force was able to get that feeling out that, yes, A couple of hospitals left us, but we're still a great place to work and make. And as Bill said, no one's going to do anything unless they can make money off of it.
Yeah.
No one's going to do that. And we found a way to make sure that there is ways to make money.
Yep. And again, I think, as I look back, I think that success, a lot of it, Jerry, is certainly to the point of the trajectory the Valley was on before this happened. I mean, we were growing at such a great pace. Those outside companies that have come here, and we're looking at about almost 14 now, that's what they looked at as well, as we know. I mean, they looked at an area that was growing, has the potential to keep growing. And again, it's a bump, but we are still going, and we look at some of the developments that have been announced in the last 30 days are still, companies are still wanting to come here. And, I talked with Aaron White and Luke Hansen, and by the end of the year, they're predicting Gateway Industrial Park could be full. And what do we do next? So I think that's a good point that, there's still an area here. There's still people moving here and wanting to talk about things. And, as we sit here and record this here today, later today, we'll be part of the UWC groundbreaking for the brand new Health Science building, $340 million investment by the state. It's gonna really redevelop this area for years to come. And so that's exciting.
Another, I think, important thing to keep in mind about the value of this community is the three big players all stepped up in a major way, Mayo, Marshfield, and Oakleaf.
Yep.
Everybody has picked up more patients, has taken over various shares of the market, doing the best they can to help. That really says a lot about this community and the people who live and work here.
Absolutely. Again, a lot of maybe what we know was done behind closed doors, or we got privy. But again, I don't think everybody understands how much each of those entities has done and will continue to do. Again, but they have to make sure can they do it in a way that they can sustain that, and it's not just a flash in the pan.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the other things. I think early on we came up, or it was alerted that, the foundation money that was raised here over the years, Jerry, you had a big role in that, calling Damon and saying, okay, we need to make sure that money stays.
And I actually just got an email last week saying that all the donors are getting letters that have funds in the foundation that, for permission to transfer it to the local community foundations, Chippewa and Eau Claire.
Okay.
So, and I know that, and we've seen it on the news, places like history centers have gotten some of the artifacts. I think that it was sometimes people think of it an afterthought, but a lot of people in Chippewa and Eau Claire have given huge sums of money to those two hospitals. So the money will come back now into endowments and still be great for the Chippewa Valley. It's a different person giving it out, but it's still coming back into the Chippewa Valley.
Right.
I really hope that down the road, maybe it's going to take a few years, we still can appreciate all the sisters had done for the Chippewa Valley. I know it's going to take a while to get through the pain here, but I hope we can realize down a few years and just reflect back that maybe the ending wasn't so great, but the 150 years beforehand was great.
Yeah, you can't throw all of that out for 2 years of that existence. And again, to remind people, when this decision was made, it was made by two different groups. It was made by the sisters and the operating board. So, again, tough decisions. But again, I think your point is very good, Jerry, that we have to remember over the time frame, really the wonderful things they did that helped create our area. Really, they have a lot there to own. So as we look at some of the other things, a lot of things were talked about, statues and Bibles that we dealt with and all these other things. I would just maybe ask each of you, from your perspective, what did you see as maybe I hate to call it a success, but, what was the number one thing you thought, hey, we walked out of this, Jerry, you talked a little bit about, we're just, sharing news and things, but maybe from your perspective, what did you see as our number one thing that we were able to do?
Well, I think that we were able to help get a lot of the Prevea patients lined up with other primary care providers. Not all yet.
Right.
But the three major players stepped up and have really taken on a lot of those patients. There were some 900 potential deliveries scheduled for Sacred Heart over the next year, and those have been matched up with current providers in town. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Continuing their prenatal care and other things.
Yep.
The dialysis patients have been taken care of. The cancer patients have been taken care of. So big steps. It's not all done, and we haven't figured it out for everybody. But a lot of the urgency that happened when this was suddenly announced has been dealt with.
Right. And again, I think people have to remember we never went into this knowing we're going to solve everything.
Right.
And again, all we can do is either provide the information or make a recommendation to what you could do. Because at healthcare, you have to make that decision. Do I want to switch doctors? Do I want what are my options? Now you need to make that decision.
I think Bill hit the patient side. I'll hit a little bit on the employee side. I know many of those employees did find jobs here in the Chippewa Valley, whether it at the other three on it or someplace else in the Chippewa Valley. So I know there's some still out there looking for work, but I feel very good that a majority of them did find work and could be able to stay here in the Chippewa Valley.
Yeah. And, with that, it's helped Scott Rogers, who's our Vice President of Government Affairs here, and myself an opportunity to look at some things and address with the state down the road. When we looked at a lot of those employees, a lot of them were tied up and still are, with contracts or non-competes and things like that. Or if you wanted your total severance package, well, then you had to wait it out. It's like, okay, some of that, yes, is state law or recommendation, but it's like if you've left the community, common sense tells me that those things should be done. I mean, you can't hold somebody to it. And so, again, learning from what happened, there are several of those things for us here at the Chamber that we're going to try to address with the state over the next year or so and say, can some of this be changed in these circumstances? Because, again, if you've pulled out or whatever the company is, you've absolutely left, to me, a non-compete goes out the door. I mean, if you've disappeared, let the person go to work. But I think your point, Jerry, is that a lot of people have been able to settle here. We just had a conversation with our friends at Oakleaf this past week and talked about several of those non-compete or the severance packages are kind of running to the end, and they're trying to get as many of those on. But again, to Bill, your point, I think between all three, they've hired what they could and tried to keep, because out of all the industries, we do know attracting medical individuals, especially doctors, to our area is not sometimes the easiest thing. They want to be another thing. So, I think what we've accomplished has been good, but I think there's still work as a community that we need to look at as well.
Yes, I think the other thing that we did is raise the awareness of how complex healthcare is, especially funding healthcare. And there's a lot more people that are beginning to understand how difficult and complex this whole business is.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers, and nobody else does right now, but clearly long-term something has to change.
Correct.
I think that it was surprised me too in the beginning of how many things that those two hospitals did that didn't make money.
Yeah.
And just I think yesterday or so it was in the paper about Chippewa County after building a new morgue, for example, and I think it was $750,000 or something like that they had free for eons in Chippewa. So simple things like that you don't even think about, but somebody has to pay for it.
Right.
And as Bill said, that I think people look at their own situation, just like I do in my bill, and think, boy, they make a ton of money. But when you start thinking of all the areas that they do not make money, and I'm including Marshfield, of course, and Oakleaf and Mayo. I think Bill's right. We've raised awareness and started getting the dialogue that no business is going to go in and do stuff that they know they're going to lose money on.
Right. I mean, you can, again, you go back to the beginning when the nuns ran all the hospitals. Yeah, they prayed every day that God provided the money and they'll take care of it. But at some point, this has now become a business. So what can you do and how much can you afford to do it for and all of that? But I think your point of raising the awareness to how complex it truly is, we just as individuals never looked at that. It was just we went to our doctor, we did it, moved on, and never worried about the 12 layers that, come from all of that. And Bill, this has been your life. I mean, this is what you did for all those years.
Yeah, I did it in as a practicing physician and as a leader of groups. But it's a very complex area, and if it was simple, we would have dealt with it a long time ago.
Right.
And so it is incredibly complex.
I think one of the things, Dave, that impressed me was Bill when was talking about emergency room in our group and said, well, it's not just this. And then he rattled off all the multitude of things that you just don't throw another 10 spaces on. I mean, you have to have this, and this, but the personnel, the equipment, whatever. So it's not a simple thing like someone thinks, throw another brick wall up, and it's not like that.
Well, I even had a discussion with a group one time when they said, why can't you just expand them? And it's like, okay, let's say you did that, you still need hospital beds after that for the person to go to, because I said somebody who's spent a fair amount of their younger life in an emergency room, you just don't go home.
Right.
And I think that's the point people didn't get. It's like, okay, what are you going to do when you got to discharge them?
Right.
But ask a little bit. I mean, if we're talking about emergency rooms, we again saw the two close. From what I'm hearing, the demand is still there, but it seems to be lessening a little bit. I'd just be curious what you're both hearing overall in this.
I think it's a challenge, and that may be the biggest remaining challenge is the emergency room care. Both Marshfield and Mayo are very, very busy. I'm hearing that if you are really sick and have an emergency, you get seen right away.
Okay.
There's a number of issues about that. However, the waiting times are long for simple things.
Sure. Because
there's so many people. And that's going to hopefully get a little better as a couple of new urgent care sites are opening up.
So Oakleaf, just to be clear, Oakleaf is opening in urgent care both in Chippewa and Menominee.
And Helly is going to be opened by, I believe, Marshfield.
I believe so, by fall, I believe.
And so those are going to help relieve some of the strain. And I think we also have to try to teach people not to use the emergency room for primary care. That's just the wrong purpose. So over time, this is going to work out, but it's going to take, I'm guessing it's going to take a year or two for Marshfield and Mayo to figure out if they want to expand emergency room care, because it's a very complex and very expensive process.
And not only, but can they and how? I mean.
Yeah, I know that we've heard all through the media the disappointment about the $15 million. Mm-hmm. And I think Bill hit it right on the head right there when he said that they do not know, Marshfield and Mayo do not know what they need to do on it. I think that people expect, well, it's 15, you should just take the dang thing and run with it. Well, you can't do that. You have to have a plan. And it's a complex plan. And frankly, those urgent cares over the they're going to take 3 or 4 months to see how they work out and expend hours on it. I know the Chippewa one I just saw was starting off with slow hours, and then in a month it was going 8 to 8 and Sundays and stuff. But it's going to take a time. And then the people have to figure it out too.
Correct.
We really have to still get that story out in our media about, yes, they're open. Yes, you should be at it. And but, someone's sick, you think about it, and suddenly it doesn't pop. ER pops in your head right away.
Yeah.
And we have still a lot of work to do on that, meaning both our task force part and also the whole community, to getting people to think emergency room, urgent care, care. Instead, obviously, if you got blood running all down, you need to go to ER. But I've been in, like all of us, in the ERs and looking around and thinking, why is someone in here on it for that? And of course, the docs, I'm sure, would tell us lots of stories. But I think Bill's correct. We need at least 6 months and probably a year before we see, is there really that much need of the emergency room?
Right. And again, I think that comes back to why we decided as a task force to pause. There's so many things, again, as a group of volunteers who can make recommendations, we couldn't do. We needed to see what everybody else is doing and what moves they're making before we really say, okay, this is what we see.
Right. And that's going to take 6 to 12 or 24 months.
Right. Which, again, going back to January, is what we predicted of 12 to 24 months of it's going to take for this whole thing to kind of flatten out. A couple of weeks ago, Jerry, to your point about planning and all that, a couple of weeks ago I was with some friends and they were visiting us here, but she's an ER nurse. And she said, believe it or not, David, every time somebody comes in, I ask them when we discharge them as a family, do you have a plan of how you're using the ER? And I'm like, what? She said, David, people need to have a plan. When do you go to the ER? Are we calling the nurse online? Are we going to urgent care? What is it? So when the catastrophe happens, you're not trying to think about it because now you're in panic mode. Yeah. She compared it somewhat kind of like to, your first child being born. It's like, just get to the hospital and then we'll figure it out as the husband. But I think people, she had a good point, need to understand where are we going? Where are we? All of those things have to be factored into. We need to be better consumers of healthcare and be able to fight for ourselves a little bit better. Yes. So as a doctor, Bill, how has that changed in your mind? And what would you tell people as they deal with healthcare? What should they be doing more of?
Well, standing up for themselves is a big one. You've got rights as a patient. You need to exert those. And you need full explanations. What is changing is as healthcare continues to get more complex. I'm a cancer doctor. We have treatments now that we didn't have when I started.
Sure.
So more people are being treated, more people will get better. But it's also a lot more complex and a lot more expensive. So we need patients who are willing to say, wait a minute, I don't understand. Please make sure I understand. Or how is that going to happen? The healthcare providers are under a lot of stress right now.
Yes.
And they may occasionally not be as forthcoming as they might want to be. Mm-hmm. And it's up to patients to be an equal part of this. Don't just sit there and nod your head and walk away. Just ask the questions and get a full answer.
Yeah.
I think, as a patient that we have to be considerate, too, of these 3 hospitals, of the pressure they've went on. It's especially in some of the areas of it. And as Bill said, of course, you have to stick up an ass, but you also have to sometimes sit back and say, don't yell at them. They're trying to do the best they can, and they got a mess on it. So if you are sitting for 8 hours in that ER room, it's not their fault.
No.
Not it. And to try and just empathize with them. I know, Bill, of course, has many friends in the profession, but I do too, and I know there's a lot of stress on it right now, and we experience, and we just got over a massive amount of stress with COVID.
Yeah.
So suddenly throw it back locally, a lot more stress. So be kind too when you have your in there on it, and realize I know all of them because we all know they're trying their best.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point is, people don't go into this, It's more about, first, I have a passion to take care of people, to care for people. And, my father was a paramedic for 22 years. And, it just, people sometimes just take it for granted or want to get mad at those individuals. But to your point, Jerry, and if it's not them, then who? We know, again, with the strong nursing program at both UWC, CVTC, they still can't pump out enough students in time. So, it's one of those things that if as a society we don't start understanding, we don't start accepting and being a little bit kinder, we could run into a major problem. That enough people are going to say, I don't need this stress in my life, Any final comments? We had a great conversation this morning, but to give both of you an opportunity to final words that you want to share with our listeners in the community about this whole thing.
Yeah, I think, Dave, that this is still a very exciting community, and I am incredibly optimistic and excited about the future of the Chippewa Valley. We've learned, especially in Eau Claire, that we get these kinds of bumps occasionally with a big setback, and we recover, and we work hard, and we get better, and we will be a better Chippewa Valley in the future.
Yep.
Because of the people that are here. So it's always unfortunate when these bumps in the road happen, but I'm convinced that the people here will make it better.
Okay. Jerry?
I think what really impressed me was the volunteers who care about everything here. I mean, as you said at the beginning, there was people calling me, you, everybody, what can I do to help? What can I do to help?
Yep. Simple words.
Yep. And, we talk in our society that people don't care. Bullshit.
Yeah.
In the Chippewa Valley, they do care.
Absolutely.
And they really want to do what they can to make our place a great place to live. And that impressed me.
Yeah, I would agree with both your comments 100%. So thank you both. And to our listeners, we will keep you up to date on issues that, as they do change with the healthcare industry and our communities, because I think, again, to both of you, you said it, if we only did one major thing, and that was to raise the awareness of what's going on, we will continue to keep that keep you all appraised of what's going on within our areas and what changes may come within that whole area of healthcare. And we know the story is never going to be done. So we just have to be more attentive to what's happening. So thank you both. Thank you to our listeners. And Chelsea, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you to both of our guests. And as we close out, I just want to do a quick thank you to our media sponsor, Royal Credit Union, and a thank you for tuning into this episode. We'll catch you in the next one.